Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I'm unemployed, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at ink now, shall we? Today's ink is Noodler's Walnut Brown. A wonderful ink. You probably can't tell because of the bottle and how dark the ink is, but this is only about 2/3 full. I received both the ink and this pen on non-denominational Xmas, and ever since then, they are a functioning pair. They go great together. Now, this is Kaweco Dia2. It's a medium nib, which for me is generally about as small of a nib as I go when I have a choice. I do prefer broader nibs. However, these two go particularly well together in the non-fountain pen friendly paper situations of the world, which hopefully I'll get to demonstrate better to you today. Now, here's a little spoiler for the test to come. Chromatography of Noodler's Walnut, as you can see. Some water resistance, in fact, is better than it shows here, but also great potential for shading, which unfortunately didn't come through quite as clearly in some of the tests, but great brown color. Now let's start with Clairefontaine's 90 grams per square meter fairly dense paper. Now on this I used the Dia2 as well as a Parker knockoff, the Hero 616, because it has a slightly finer nib, and I knew that perhaps even a medium with a dry writing ink wouldn't cut it on some of the cheaper papers. So as you can see, wonderful, beautiful, rich brown. And this water test, you might not even be able to very clearly tell that there was a water test. It became a somewhat grayer brown, but it's still very clearly there. It's very readable. There wasn't spread. There wasn't a lot of, some of it washing off and then dyeing the paper around it. It was a very clean water test. Up next, sorry, fighting off cold, is Rhodia 80 gram per square meter paper. Again, used the Dia2. Again, very impressive water test. Did very well. The dry time was half what it was on this paper. Here, the Hero dried in 20 seconds, the Dia2 in 24. Here, only 9 seconds. Did very well. There was no bleed, no feather, no spread. Show through, very minimal. Echo, again, very minimal. Up next is your basic Mead notebook paper, which I think just about every American school child will be familiar with. For this, I used the Hero because it does have a much finer nib, and this paper loves to spread, which it certainly did. I guessed right, because here, the medium on the Rhodia actually looks like it's writing more narrow than the fine on this paper. That's how much it spread. However, the bleed through was not atrocious for this paper for fountain pen use. You would not very comfortably be able to use the other side. However, it didn't render the next page unusable. Now, here's where the water test started to get, I'll call it interesting. Some of the components of the ink decided to migrate and started to not dye the paper, but dye the fibers of the paper nearest to where the ink had initially touched. Very bizarre. I mean, it's kind of pretty, but weird, because it hadn't done that on the other papers, only on the cheapest papers. Again, you see a little bit of it here in your basic copier paper, but not quite as much. And then, as you can see, great water test. Bleed through was non-existent. Show through, I felt, was pretty good considering generally how dark the ink is. And lastly, Moleskine paper, which is why I've gone through so much of this ink, because before I knew better, I was a diehard Moleskine user, and I thought you just had to submit to horrible reactions between fountain pens, ink, and the paper. So I have just come to accept that you can only write on one side of the paper because there is mad bleed through. However, it doesn't render the other side unusable when you use drier writing inks, especially this ink, because as you can tell, no spread, no feathering, which for those of you familiar with Moleskine paper is almost unheard of. This is a beautiful dry writing ink that again resists water, although you'll get that totally bizarre random chromographic migration. Dry time was pretty good. You still get some of that shading, as you can see a bit in the swab up here. It's a great combination. So whenever I have to use Moleskine, which is quite a bit because I bought several of them before giving up on them entirely as my primary use, but when I do, it's these two together. So with smaller writing nibs, such as these, and drier writing inks like this one, I mean, as you can tell, I go through it a lot. Highly recommend it. I say that you should go out and get some, because if you have a wet writing pen that you can't quite seem to stem the flow of, this. And even in pens that do tend to write a bit dry, it'll still write. It's not a struggle. So I highly recommend this ink. This will remain in my ink arsenal for a long time, probably as long as they continue to make it and as long as I continue to use fountain pens, which at this rate I feel is going to both be a very long time. So go out, get some. Definitely worth the investment. If for nothing else, the fact that it's a beautiful brown color and it resists water amazingly. So long and best of luck from the Triple N Network. Bye.